Wow, we are back again, 10 episodes deep. Can you believe that this is the 10th episode, Johanna?
Happy 10th episode birthday.
Yep, 10th episode. We're like
Raiders.
5 months into the podcast. It's gone by so fast. I can't
I
believe it.
know. It's like, we should start a podcast. Boom. Here
Yep.
we are.
And now Cosmic Summit has already almost been 6 months ago.
Oh my gosh, half a year. That's
insane. In 2 weeks that'll have been 6 months ago.
Oh my gosh, that's just flown by. Yeah. But yeah, it's exciting. We are. I mean, this is the 10th episode, but we have nearly locked down like our official. We've got music and proper animated intro thanks to Luke's skills in the editing suite, and we're also lining up our first guests. So today is just us, but when we crack on next couple episodes, we're going to start branching out into the world of guests on the podcast.
Yeah, so typically what we've been doing is every other episode we alternate, Johanna presents, I present, and back and forth. But now we're probably going to start spicing it up with having some guests on. So we have a big pool of friends that we love to have on. And then we actually just had a guy who has done some debunking videos on Atlantis, I think really just Ice Age civilization, because he's an expert in Neolithic people, and so we're gonna be having him come on, and he wanted to make sure to avoid it being any kind of malicious debate or whatever. He just wants to come on and have a conversation, which is something that needs to be had in this space. So much of the aftermath of Flint Dibble and Graham Hancock has not been good for this space, and that's not something that Johanna and I have on the
we're not going to copy those. Like we're not about that. It's very much everybody is welcome at the Raiders podcast, no matter whether you're coming at the angle of aliens, ancient civilizations, academic, like whatever. We're all welcome in this space and like happy to have a Discord. Let's show the older adults how it's done.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, the youngest people in the space are going to have to be the adults.
Yeah, be the adults. Like I've got friends who are like massively into ancient aliens, and I've got friends who are literal scientists and academically studied people, and it don't make a difference to me. So today, very exciting. I remember talking about this a couple of months ago. We were like, oh my gosh, Gladiator II. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? We've both seen it now, and we've held off on giving each other our feedback.
We haven't spoken about it. What I love is that this show is actually us talking. I mean, we talk a little bit about, I guess business stuff, in between the shows, but in the shows is really where we catch up and talk about these kind of things.
We save it for you guys, because we're like, we might as well have this conversation with everybody. But,
tell me your thoughts on Gladiator II.
Okay.
For everyone watching, probably spoilers.
Oh yeah, hella spoilers.
I don't know if there's a way that we can keep this spoiler-free review. So
yeah, I'm sorry, gonna be spoilers because otherwise it's I can't talk about it. Okay, my initial thoughts. Let's not completely like bash it. I was entertained, not gonna lie. I did like the arena fights. I thought like the design and the costumes amazing. Denzel amazing. I was most excited about Joseph Quinn, who played one of the twins, the like older twin brother, because he played Eddie in Stranger Things, and he's a phenomenal actor. So I was so excited to see him. So yeah, I thought it was like overall entertaining, but I think it fell massively short from when you're comparing it to the original. It was almost an impossible task to do anyway, because the original one is like, it's memeified, it's in the canon of like one of the best films ever in history. Everybody had it on DVD because it hit the market just at the time as DVDs. So it's like a DVD family favorite. The music from
and so many iconic quotes that people have been saying for over 2 decades now.
You can't be like, oh, Gladiator. People just immediately start going like, father to a murdered son and husband to a murdered wife, and like it's just iconic. And so where I think Gladiator 2 for me didn't meet that is because Gladiator 1, well, not just Gladiator, it's actually not, it's not really about him becoming a gladiator. That's kind of like a second track story. It's about a man who loses everything, and it's about his like underdog story, and trying to save Rome and avenge his, well, his kind of like stepfather. And the baddie is so maliciously evil, like psychopathically evil. Like you are gunning for this guy to get revenge, and that's what the story's about. Whereas in Gladiator 2, it didn't have that like emotional pull and power for me. Like I felt bad. It's not Paul Mescal. He played Lucius, his Maximus's son, but they didn't give him like really enough, I don't think enough like emotional fuel to do that
Totally agree.
journey. Like we kind of open on the film and it's like, oh, there's him and his wife, and then like boom, immediately into battle, she immediately dies. Whereas the whole beginning of the other film, you had this whole
For the
build up.
first 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so before anything ever happens to Maximus.
Exactly. And so I was a little bit like, oh, she's pretty, but I don't really care that she died. Sorry.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you know, oh, you'll get another wife. Like, why? Tell me more why. She didn't even speak. I was like, dude, she had like 2 lines before she died. I was like, at least open on them having like a massive argument or something. Like, where are these characters? And like the last thing they happened to say to each other was, I hate you. And then it's like, like give him something more to carry, because it was supposed to be that the rage of this person's death brought him all the way through.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like he had enough fuel to really go on that journey with. And don't get me started about the monkeys, the CGI monkeys, because
oh man, yeah.
I actively had to go, you know, when you actively have to choose to believe, like to suspend your belief in a film. I looked at it, I went, oh, that's a really bad CGI. Okay, I'm just going to pretend, come on, it's a film, just get into it. Like, ignore the CGI, just let's roll with it. But if you have to do that in a movie, then you haven't hit the bar.
Yep. There were several times where I had to actively suspend my disbelief, which isn't a good thing at all. You don't want to actually have to think. You don't want to be watching the movie and then go, oh well, you know, it is just a movie, and then continue watching. You don't want that. So first time that happened for me is when Acacius, who is Pedro Pascal, when they are approaching that Numidian city and they let the barge down, and then he charges to the front lines and doesn't bring his helmet and doesn't bring his shield.
Yeah.
I'm like, who?
He's the general. He's not going to be first over the wall. You put your pawns over the wall first, and like.
Well, and one by Roman time, the general is not out fighting on the front line, and if he was, he would have his helmet on and he would have his shield up. But did you notice that all the main characters during their fighting scenes did not wear helmets and did not wear shields? Like when
Paul Mescal was practically naked most of the film. I was like concerned for. I was like, come on, you gotta. No, I'd be wearing every single piece of metal.
It makes no sense. They would never, ever, no Roman soldier would ever go into battle, let alone a general who's been training for decades, without his helmet and without his shield. It sounds like such a small thing, but it just takes me out of the movie because I'm thinking this is stupid. This guy is a general. He would never be at the front lines, and he's approaching people who have helmets, swords, and their shield, and then he's easily defeating them. I'm like, this guy is not Achilles in Troy. Achilles is a half mythical person who can kill anybody. This is just a regular Roman general. So that took me completely out of the movie, maybe 3 times.
There's a term that can be used in film when someone's a Mary Jane, a character, which is a character that goes through, you know, various obstacles and things, but they just kind of do it with ease. So they just sort of happen to, oh, there's a monster, oh, don't worry, I killed it with ease. Oh no, there's this, oh, don't worry, I fixed that with ease. And they don't really, they kind of end in the same place as they did in the beginning, and they made Lucius a Mary Jane. He
Yeah.
was never I never really felt peril for his character, because one, I was like, they're not going to kill him off because they did that in the first one, so he's fine. But also, every situation he didn't like really struggle. Like, he
No.
smashed the monkeys. He could immediately fight the guard off when they were testing him in the like training center. In every single arena fight, he was just like dodging arrows, and he didn't take any like massive hits at any one time where I was like, oh my god, he's gonna lose an eye or a head or a foot or whatever.
Yeah.
He was a complete Mary Jane. Again, that's not his fault. Like, he was doing the best he could. The actor was doing the best he could with the situation. But so yeah, not only that they not give him like the proper stakes and the peril, but he kind of ended the movie pretty much in the same place, personally, as when he started, which was not the case for the first film, for Maximus. And when I know a film is, or a TV show starts to go bad for me, when I start rewriting quickly in my head what I would prefer to happen. And I left the cinema going, there's a problem for this. What was the problem for me? And then I went, oh my god, I know how to fix it. So what the movie should have been about for me, it's about a little boy who lost his family and doesn't have family. And the movie should be about how he finds family. Like, that would be a nice archy circle thing to do. So there's a little boy who lost his mom, and his dad was killed, and he doesn't have family. He tried to have a wife, she died. And then and he was on this like ragey rampage thing. And then he finally got into the arena, because it was just all about killing the general. And then in the movie, when he actually got to meet and fight Pedro Pascal, spoiler, all Pedro Pascal had to do was say, I knew your father. And immediately the rage just like dropped out of him. And he was like, fine. I was like, that's not enough, dude. You've come all this way to kill this man. And all he had to do was say, I knew your father. So what? Doesn't change the fact you killed my wife, mate. However, if his mum and Pedro Pascal had a child, there would be a secret little sister that he would have no clue about until he got to the arena and realized. And Pedro Pascal could have then done things like, I am not your enemy. I knew your father. I'm the father to your sister. And he could have seen this little girl
that gave me chills thinking about
right?
that. Yeah.
And then he would have flashed back to when he was a little boy watching his father get killed. And then he suddenly realizes, like, oh, if I have to go down this revenge thing, I'm just continuing the circle of pain and crazy for this little girl. And it would be something that would really stop him. Not just, I knew your father, but like, oh shit. I have family, I have a sister. Like, he can be angry at his mom for whatever, but the little sister's like an innocent party in this. And then I thought the little sister would also fix the problem, my second problem with the film, which was that the baddies just weren't bad enough for me. Like, the twin brothers, they were kind of just like spoilt brats, and they weren't evil. Like, I was thinking you needed to make the dynamic of the twins more like, one of them could be bratty and stupid and a little bit not very clever, but the other one needed to be either psychotically menacing and really threatening. Like, you do this, this happens, and I just didn't get, like, the twins were just like a bit pathetic. But if there was a little girl involved, you could use her as a means to really mess with Lucius, because like in the way that Joaquin Phoenix in the first film, he was all like really creepy with his sister, and the audience were immediately like, ooh, kill him. You could have done something really like creepy or menacing with one of the brothers and the sister. And I was like, oh, she would have just solved, like, she would have raised everything, raised the stakes. The end of the movie would be about him finding family. Yeah, he lost his mom. Yeah, he lost his dad, but I wanted to see him on a farm, providing a home for this 12-year-old girl or whatever. Yeah, so that was, I in my head, that's how that movie went.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed the movie.
I actually love that you might make it about this little boy trying to find family, because instead the movie was just literally a lesser recreation of the first movie, and
Right.
Lucius, his whole motive was the same thing as Maximus, was to rise back to the top and then, kill the emperor, or, kill this guy.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, kind of going back to what you were saying at the very beginning, we don't have any reason to actually care about why Lucius is upset, because we spend a whole of about 30 seconds with his wife, and then when his wife dies, he like barely cries. He kind of quietly cries in the corner of that boat.
Oh,
um
yeah.
but then the Romans, they just kind of go over to him and like, hey, you got to come with us, and then he just leaves his wife floating in the water. And I'm just like, what, where is the slobbering snot crying that happened in the first movie? um
Yeah.
and then,
Agree.
in the first movie, you've got these 30 or 40 minutes building up to Maximus being, he's going to be the temporary emperor of Rome to restore the Republic. And, that's probably, I mean, it's the greatest thing that could happen to any Roman, the biggest honor. And then,
Mhm.
Marcus Aurelius is killed, and then Commodus has Maximus executed. But then Maximus escapes, and he's basically in exile, and he goes and finds his family that's slaughtered, and then he's sold into slavery. And then, it's this big, big buildup. I mean, before you hit the 2 or 3 minute mark in the movie, Lucius' wife is already dead, and that's all the bad stuff that's going to happen to him to fuel him for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And I like what you were saying about finding family, and maybe by the end of the movie, uh, he finds this new sister. Maybe Acacius dies. But instead what happens is literally exactly the opposite of that. At the end of the movie, I just met Lucius at the beginning of the movie, and I don't know anything about him, and he's the only person left alive. Literally nobody that he cared about. None of his family
Yeah.
members are still alive. And his reunion with his mother wasn't satisfying at all. There was no emotional depth there. It was like they hadn't seen each other in 20 years, and they go, "Hello."
Hello, I'm not the person that you think I am. And he's
Yeah,
like really angry at her, and then he's fine with her. And I was like, whoa, you need to. I have a feeling that there was some missing scenes that got cut
had to
because
be.
the turn was too quick for
Yeah.
him to forgive the general and for him to
Mhm.
forgive the mum. And it was
Yeah.
just I was like, ooh, they've cut something weird
Yeah.
here.
Because the first time he sees her, the last thing he says is he screams at her to get out of his
Yeah.
quarters. And then the second time he sees her, he goes, "I lost you once. I don't plan to lose you again." I'm like,
Right. There was definitely some extra scenage. I know Ridley Scott likes to shoot a lot and yeah. And the other thing that I would have changed is that obviously people are like, "Ugh, the CGI monkeys," and so I would have like lessened the arena stuff and made sure that there was equal amount, if not more, juicy drama stuff going on outside the arena, so that when it
yeah.
really pays off when you get into the, otherwise you get a bit desensitized to arena. And what I also would have done is instead of just adding like CGI animals, which aren't very perilous, I wanted the
Kill real animals.
I not real animals. I wanted the twins, especially one if one was like really psychotic, to start mentally messing with Lucius. So I was like, imagine putting him in a ring and there's like a pregnant woman, an old man, and a little girl, and
Oh,
he
yeah,
has to
yeah,
save
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like a bit like a Saw situation
Yeah,
where
I
and
don't.
I was like, that would be way more like, oh my God, like what does he do?
Mhm,
Because either way, he has to let someone die. And that for me, that's more, and then he's got a real reason to really want to like kill it's
mhm,
not just for
mhm.
Rome or whatever. It's like, yeah, anyway.
I completely agree. The last thing, I guess we can touch on it a little bit more, but the emperors, it's such a wasted opportunity because they're not interesting. It's like Macrinus is the more interesting guy. Denzel's character, he
Mm,
he takes up the insidious emperor kind of role as the big baddie, but he
yeah.
shouldn't be, because you have Gaeta and Caracalla. They depict them as being twins, but they weren't really twins. They were born like 10 months apart, and or maybe a year apart. And then they had this bitter rivalry. 211 AD, they had this bitter rivalry for almost a year. And Gaeta was probably more similar in real life to his depiction in the movie, where he's definitely a little bit off, a little bit twisted. Gaeta's the one that gets his head cut off by Caracalla.
Oh,
Um, he's the brother that gets killed.
so he's Joseph Quinn,
Yes, yeah, yeah,
the one
yeah.
I wanted to see. Yeah.
So he's the one that was in real life was probably more reasonable, had less ruling ambition, less like military ambition, more of a like a reluctant ruler. And then so they have this feuding rivalry, and then Caracalla, who I forget who he's played by, but he's kind of he's depicted as like the really frail, like flamboyant, weaker emperor that's a little more crazy. And I think he had some kind of venereal disease or whatever that was making him insane. And that's how he's depicted in the movie. But in real life, if you look up a picture of Caracalla, he is like a Sigma Chad all the way through. Big guy with a big, strong jawline and like furrowed brow and a really intense expression, like big physique wise. And just complete opposite of the way he was in the movie. And he was extremely intelligent and extremely paranoid. And he cared more about hanging out with his soldiers on the front lines of the Roman frontier, like out in the dirt and grime. And probably because he knew that would build up loyalty among the soldiers. Because as you can see in the movie, if you have loyalty of soldiers, you can kind of shift things around in Rome. Anyways, so Caracalla invites Gaeta to end the feud. So he invites him to the imperial palace. And when Gaeta shows up, the Praetorian Guard basically they jump him, or they ambush him in the palace. And then he runs to his mother. So both Gaeta and Caracalla, even though their father, Emperor Septimius Severus, had already died, their mother was still living in the palace. He runs to her quarters, and they basically hunt him down and just slay him like at his mother's feet.
See, that would have been a better
I know, right?
movie.
That would have been really interesting. And then so then Caracalla, he's emperor for maybe 6 more years. And Macrinus was a real guy. He actually served under Septimius Severus, not Marcus Aurelius, I don't think, like is depicted. Thank you. Not Marcus Aurelius, like is depicted in the movie, but he served under their father, and he's plotting in the background for the better part of a decade. And he was a Praetorian prefect underneath Caracalla for 6 years. And so this would have been an interesting thing if Caracalla is this brutish guy who, he wanted to be like Alexander the Great. So he was fighting, not on the front lines, but he was consistently fighting in the war campaigns, very skilled fighter, very big, like man's man fighting emperor. And he was intelligent. So that's more of a roadblock for Macrinus to conspire around. That would have been more interesting to have this emperor who's competent but wicked. He slaughtered his brother, and Macrinus is having to figure out, I got to kill this guy at some point. So anyways, in real life, they're on an expedition to Mesopotamia, and Caracalla stops off on the side of the road, and this lightly packed expedition where he doesn't have as many guards. And Macrinus paid off those guards to literally stab him in the back and just basically stab him to death on the side of the road in the Middle East. And then Macrinus really does become emperor. That's actually how it happened. And I feel like making Caracalla this weak boy that is easily manipulated into just cutting his brother's head off, and then he gets stabbed in the ear, during the game. I was like, the real guy was a lot cooler than this, and he would have actually been a good match for Macrinus to overthrow him, So anyways, lots of places where the movie could have actually
I know, it had such good ingredients, and I was like, oh, if you just changed little bits or drew a little bit more from history or like change some of the dynamics, it could have been really, really good. But if not, I was like, it's a bit of a Sunday movie now. Just whack it on a Sunday.
Yeah. But it was beautiful though, getting the way that they recreated the city of Rome. Everything in the movie was very pretty, I guess, other than
like design wise.
Baboons. But I will watch it again, probably just at least for the visual aspect, because very few times. I mean, Rome is kind of like my ancient history popcorn genre, where I don't make videos about it and I don't seriously study it, but I do read about it because it's like a nice place to escape to. That's still an ancient history, but it's fun. It's a fun world to be in, and just to see the world on film with that much production quality behind it. Oh, the shot of the Great Pyramids was cool too, and totally unexpected. You remember that?
Oh yeah, I saw the pyramids in it as well. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But that is our review.
That's our brief review.
What do you give it? What do you give it 1 through 10, or out of 10?
Out of 10, I was entertained. I'd say a 6 out of 10, whereas the other one is like a good 9.5, 10 out of 10 movie. So
Yeah. The other one is definitely like a 9.5. I'm gonna give this a 5.5, a 6.
5. Okay, less
You
generous,
know,
but it's all right. Yeah.
something like that. You know, it's unfortunate. I wish, it's one of those movies. I'm like, maybe I just watched it wrong. Maybe I just need to watch it one more time. But I know that that's not the case, unfortunately. So
Okay. And if you're just joining us now, yeah, that was just our little review. We got very excited about
yeah,
Gladiator 2. But the main topic of today was retranslating Plato's Atlantis. I can see
yep.
people in the comments quite eager to get onto that topic. So let's do it. I've made a little PDF show thing I can show you. If I like share my screen, we can talk you through it. So basically, in a nutshell, I watched this documentary called The Atlantis Puzzle. I found it on Amazon. I think you can get it at various places on the internet. Maybe you can buy it on YouTube or but I know in England anyway, it's on Amazon. And it was really interesting because it is all about mainly focusing on the work of a guy called George Titus or Sarantatitis. He is a Greek expert, ancient text expert, academic. He did a lot of work on the Odyssey and looking at like historical astrology and or astronomy. Wait, which is the one that's not about the tarot cards? Which is the one about the sky?
Well, you have archaeoastronomy, which would be where they're studying the stars, and then
That's the one.
astrology. Yeah, then
Yeah,
astrology
not
would be your
astrology. That's the one with
symbols.
tarot.
Yeah.
So astronomy. So he went back looking using like ancient astronomy and linking, and so that they could more accurately date the Iliad, and so he got recognized by the Greek Academy. So this guy is like really into his ancient texts and using geography, science, astronomy to dig a little deeper. And he was really interested in Plato. This was like 20 years ago. And he started looking into all of Plato's texts and looking into the original Greek translations of all of his work and finding anomalies and little mistranslations in the modern day English translations, because obviously it's been translated and retranslated over the centuries.
Yeah.
Particularly, Plato picked up a lot of fuss around the 1800s, so a lot of like 19th century translations, which now when he's looking back and when you're cross-referencing across all of Plato's works, you can pick up, he said, like patterns of grammar and patterns of like imagery that really can change very important aspects of the text. So the Atlantis Puzzle documentary is all about like deep diving into Plato's text and looking at these new retranslations. Like, for example, nowhere in Plato's text does it mention Atlantic Ocean.
Mm. Oh, wow.
And in the English translation, it says about this Atlantis coming out of like civilization coming out of the Atlantic Ocean. It actually doesn't say that. It doesn't say Atlantic Ocean. It says Atlantic Pelagos, because there's like 4 different words in Greek that can be used for various types of seas and ocean, sea, peninsula. Like we in English, we only have sea or ocean. Like we kind of have 2, but in the Greek there's 4, and depending on which one is used at a certain point, it changes the visual of what you're talking about.
Wow.
So just to run it through for like a quick example, so the word ocean that we would think of as like a vast ocean, continent to continent, is called oceanos. That's the Greek word, which is not the one that's referenced in Plato's text. The 3 seas that are referenced in Plato's text is Pontos, which is the equivalent of what we would call like the Black Sea over in the Middle East, which is a sea that is completely surrounded by a continent of land. So it's in the sea that is within a continent, like the Black Sea is a Pontos. A Pelagos is a sea that is surrounding lots and lots of islands and a peninsula of land. That is called a Pelagos, which is very similar to the Argean Sea. If you like a little bit higher than Crete, the Aegean Sea is just flooded with these tiny little islands, and then the peninsula of the continent above it, and then a Thessala, which is like the Mediterranean Sea, which obviously we all know that one, which is a sea that's like not out in the ocean but surrounded by different continents. So basically, nowhere in the Greek text does it say Atlantic Ocean. It says Atlantic Pelagos or Atlantic Pontos, which is very different types of sea. So immediately I'm like, okay, I'm really interested in where this guy's going and like what he's talking about. Let me get my little images up here.
Okay. This is very interesting. Yeah, for everybody listening, ancient Greek is an incredibly large language. It would take much longer to learn to speak ancient Greek than it would English. I want to say I heard these numbers a long time ago, but the estimation for ancient Greek is that there's 1 million more words in their vocabulary than in the English language.
That makes sense because there's word. They have a lot more
1 million.
Words. Well, that's definitely a lot more words than we have in English. But yeah, and it's crazy how when you change a word or it changes a sentence, which can change a paragraph, which can actually change a narrative. It's that important, like the particular type of, and you can only really get the nuance of it again when you're not just knowing Greek, not just knowing ancient Greek, but when you can like literally read like Plato text Greek.
Yeah.
Which is amazingly commendable because I haven't read all of Plato and I've only ever read it in a modern English translation, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Can you see what I'm seeing?
I can.
Okay, so here I've just grabbed some of the stills from the documentary and some other things. So this is the Atlantean conquest, like as what the texts say on a map. So saying that the Atlantean society community had traveled and affected out. They spread out from sort of this area and they made it to Southern Europe, Egypt, across Libya. There we are. So this is the kind of like zone that we're looking at. Now, the very beginning of the search for Atlantis, where everybody starts, because the only way that Plato describes like the geographical location of Atlantis is you have to start with the Pillars of Heracles. And once everyone's in agreement about where that is, and then you can, and it's only when because everybody takes it that they're in agreement that the Pillars of Heracles are the Strait of Gibraltar, which is where southern Spain meets northern Africa. Because everyone's in agreement that that's where they are and always have been, we then take our search literally from that one point out. However, this guy, George Sarantinos, he said, he in his research said that actually the Pillars of Heracles have, yes, we are kind of unitedly in agreement that they are the Strait of Gibraltar, but that was only from the Roman Empire from 117 AD. So we're all looking at the Pillars of Heracles from a like Roman point of view, which is actually hundreds of years after when Plato wrote and referenced about the Pillars of Heracles, because that was in 300 BC. So that's 400 years before.
Yep.
And the modern day Pillars of Heracles is, they're not even pillars. The Strait of Gibraltar they're just literally talking about the two rocks on either side of the channel mouth. But if you look in ancient texts, and there is a lot of disagreement about where the ancient Pillars of Heracles were. And there's actually I think there's 11 locations according where it referenced in ancient texts about where they are. So you're like, well, damn, which one, which one can you pick? There's ones all over the gaff. You've got ones down here by Alexandria. You've got ones up by Crete. You've got ones by Italy. You've even got ones up by Norway. Like, wow. How are you going to pick it?
I wonder how somebody. I wonder what the context is of the one that's out in Persia, the one that's to the most.
Oh yeah,
east,
yeah,
right
I know.
there.
The one that right out. I know. I was like, damn, that's getting into like Göbekli Tepe area. But one way that we can have like a really good stab at the one that Plato was referencing, because Herodotus references the Pillars of Heracles in book 4 of his histories, and he talks about this this ship that sailed from this little place here, which is Samos. So it's a Samoan boat which traveled down to Bomba, which was in North Africa here, and on its return journey, it got into an accident, and it got pulled by an undercurrent and a wind, and it got pulled off trajectory, and apparently they lost control of the boat, and they were pushed right along the sea, and they went through the Pillars of Heracles, and then they crash landed in the kind of like boggy land on the other side of the Pillars of Heracles. So if we take the Herodotus story, like, and we sort of map it out logically and literally, this journey is hundreds of kilometers and would take about 20 to 30 days in a boat that was equivalent to the speed you could travel in like Herodotus's time.
Sure.
So that meant that and also if you're in a boat that like you can't control your boat and you're getting put off course, you would also have to pretty much tail most of the top of Tunisia and Morocco and southern Spain, and you wouldn't be able to like pull into land at any point. It went all the way through like the Mediterranean and then out into the Atlantic and then smashed into Spain. So these guys are saying, well, if we look at the other areas of Pillars of Heracles and go, okay, well, where logically could Herodotus have been referencing? There is a Pillars of Heracles in the Gulf of Gabes, which is actually in modern day Tunisia. And if you look from where it is from Bomba, it is literally like a swept off court. It's like a direct hit from Bomba. If you were being swept in an undercurrent, you wouldn't be unlikely that you'd be swept across and then up and then right the way over Tunisia and all the way around. And this little journey here would take the equivalent of around 6 days off course.
Okay.
And then you go through there. But then you're like, okay, so if the Pillars of Heracles, if they were actually on the other side, if they were in the entranceway to North Africa on that side of things, but where does it go? But actually, when you look back in the old Green Sahara, thousands of years ago, right in the Gulf of Gabes, it was an entryway into a sea, which when you look at the translation, right? When you look in the translation of the Greek, this is known as a pontos or a pegalos sea, not an ocean, but a literal sea that's surrounded by continent, or a sea that is surrounding loads of mini islands. And you would enter North Africa, and there would be tributaries and wetlands, and it would be an entryway into like the navigable seafaring routes of North Africa. So I'm like, okay, this is making sense so far. Like this is I'm sensing that there's like a logical backing behind this theory. And then again here, they were explaining about how if the Pillars of Heracles were there, then the Atlantic Pelagos, not the Atlantic Ocean, it would be on that side of the Pillars of Heracles. And there was like a bit of a translation. They were trying to explain the best way to explain like the nuance of the Greek grammar is in English, you know, when we say this here, that there, we are referencing like placement of space, because you wouldn't say, oh, that there, this here, and meaning something that's far away. So in the same way that they're saying the Greek text, they talk about the Atlantic people, the Atlantean people, the Atlantean Empire coming out of, and therefore like referencing it being inside something, coming out. So there was like a big emphasis in the Greek grammar about it being inside something. Whereas if you put the Pillars of Heracles like right at the mouth of the Atlantic Ocean, it doesn't have the same. It would be a bit like saying this here or that over there. So yeah, like it being literally inside, or there's a borderline between inside the Pillars of Heracles and outside. But it's basically the flipped reverse of what we think of when we think of the
Sure.
modern day Strait of Gibraltar. And yeah, and then what is interesting is, oh yeah, so here you go. That's like, so you've got the outer sea, the outside the mouth, Pillars of Heracles, the Atlantic, Pelagos. And then this is just an image of like North Africa around like at some point in the green Sahara.
Okay. So I see that lake right there. That's where we're looking at. That could have been the gate that he's talking about.
Yeah, so you've got the Gulf of Gabes, which would
Mhm.
lead into a Pelagos Sea, which would lead into tributaries and rivers. And because
Man,
also there's let me try and make this bigger here. So this is from a different paper that I found, but there is this green Sahara exactly when we're talking about like early Holocene or pre-Holocene Africa. This is the Taman Rasset River,
Mhm.
which ran right across like literally this area up to the Atlas Mountains. So you would be able to access, they're theorizing that like there's a good amount of science behind the idea that you could access by boat and sort of get across and through, a bit like in the way today the Amazon rainforest and the Amazon rivers, there
Mhm.
are
Sure.
there's ways
Oh
through.
yeah. Yeah.
The green Sahara would have been like a kind of mirror image of that, really. um
Well, and there's no doubt that there were there's no doubt that there were rivers going all through the Sahara. I mean, it was a sort of like very similar in terrain to the oasis that we see in Egypt. There's a couple, I guess, oases.
mm,
That's the way I would say it, in Egypt.
mhm, mhm,
It's this desert tropical area. It's tropical climate. If we're talking about 10,000 plus years ago. And then even at the, I've looked on the peripherals of, I'm not dragging the wrist shot structure into it, but I've looked around the peripherals of it, and you can see evidence of ancient rivers literally everywhere. Where the sand is blown away and the bedrock is revealed, there's
mhm.
rivers everywhere. But in the actual Sahara Desert, we
Yeah.
just obviously can't see the evidence that rivers were that existed on that bedrock underneath all of that sand. So there's no doubt that you probably would have been able to get from that area around Tunisia, or that's actually I think right there where you're pointing, that's actually Numidia. That where the first scene takes place in the Gladiator, it's actually right there,
Well, there we are.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt you probably could have gotten there by rivers from the west coast of Africa.
Well, it's interesting because then they go, okay, so what if, this is what they're hypothesizing, what if there was an area that was all the way around the northwest of Africa, that back, in the Holocene 10,000 plus years ago,
Mhm.
was literally in a way cut off from the mainland, not at all points, but there was like a boundary line of an area that was the Atlantis, which is where you get, this is where you get the Atlas Mountains, and this
Mm.
is and all of that. Like, it does align that could be real. And this is interestingly, I just sort of looked at that, and then this is a Greek, I think it's a Greek, it's a very early map
Of the
of the world.
Mediterranean. Okay,
And
I
it's
see, yeah.
weird how it does stop at Libya and just cut off. And I've seen other old maps as well that do like
Hmm.
kind of do the same thing. It's like they've got Libya and they've got Egypt, right? But we know that there's actually this whole other
Sure,
like
sure.
but that to Africa, but it's weird. It wasn't on their like reference of the world. And it
Do you happen to know what year that map is? That is so interesting.
it was, I just put Greek ancient map. So it would be probably, I can't say for sure.
Raiders. I need a detective
Raiders.
I need a detective in the comment section to find the
It's
age
pretty
of this map.
it's
Because
pretty primitive, but
I mean, but think about, like, even during Greek times, that is a lot of area that they are aware of. Say if that's at the height of Athens,
mhm,
450
mhm.
BC. Wow. I mean, you're talking about they have already mapped a tremendous area of their world. I mean, all the way up through Europe, and
I mean,
man,
I don't think it can be a
amazing.
real Greek map because of the earliest map that I'm aware of world map wise, it's well, actually no, there's like Babylonian one, but like yeah, I'm not quite sure actually. I'm
Well,
not.
there is a Ptolemaic map from it's somewhere in the first few centuries BC. Uh, so there's a Ptolemaic map,
Mhm.
but obviously these are, we probably don't have the originals, but they get copied through medieval times, if that makes sense. And then we have
Yeah,
copies of them
because
later
you've
on.
got copies and copies, and then there's got medieval ones, and I love ancient maps. I'm a real geek about it. And I love the fact that some of the oldest maps have more accurate depictions of coastlines in certain shapes than they get quite good when they're being copied like around the medieval Ottoman Empire. I think they were copying stuff from Alexandria, and
Oh
then
yeah,
like a
absolutely.
copies of a copy, and then there's a weird bit where then they got worse again, like and then
One of the raiders found it. 19th century Philippi map. So it's probably, a copy of a copy of a copy
copy
of
of
a
a copy.
copy
Yeah, I
of a
don't think
copy.
it's
Yeah.
actually a Greek map, but
Interesting.
thank you very much, Raiders. That's why we're doing this live. But oh yeah, so this is George. This is the guy who is literally responsible for this research. He is responsible for the Atlantis in North Africa. He went out and actually did a lot of scientific work out on the ground. I'll get to it in a minute. And he's not been paid any accolade until this
Mm.
documentary. I didn't know. Everybody and their sister knows about the Eye of the Sahara Atlantis theory is from this guy. It's
Wow.
and he's not been credited as the scientific originator, and he's written papers about it, and he's gone to conferences, like academic conferences. But anyway, so it's all down to this guy. He's the Greek expert, and he is using everything from the text and translation, and then he's using real life scientific studies and geometry to like work it out. So talking about obviously we're like, well, we know that there was no boats around the time of Plato, not Plato, Plato's Atlantis. And I'm like, well, actually, they've found in Africa, because obviously any boats that are older than a couple thousand years old are going to be completely gone, because if it's exposed to oxygen, it will just be entirely rotted away. So if there were boats, and there were over 10,000 years ago, they would all be gone unless they happen to be accidentally encased in 5 meters of clay.
Mm.
They have found this guy was digging a well in Africa, and he dug down 5 meters and he hit this 27-meter boat that is dating to, I'm going to get the exact dates here. I think it's 6,500 BC.
Oh wow.
Cool. Yes, I think that was, I'm going to refer to my notes. So anyway, this is an ancient boat that got accidentally encased. Yeah, it shouldn't be here. It should be completely gone. But it shows that Africa, there was people could make boats, people could sail around, which
Absolutely.
you would need to in the time of the Green Sahara, when everything was literally like Amazon rivers and seas and everything. And you'd also, then the second argument is like, okay, cool, they could make a boat, but we've got no evidence that there was things like trade routes that go further than local trade routes.
Sure.
Or anything other than that. But no, because there was a discovery from a body. They found an ancient person from 8,000 BC all the way up in England, and it was discovered that this person was eating 2 types of wheat, and they were not local or indigenous to England. They were cultivated wheat that had actually traveled from the Middle East. So there was a trade route at 8,000 BC. So we're talking 10,000 years ago plus. There was a trade route of wheat and grain that was not native to England. It was not being grown in England, but people were eating it. So there, we have to like keep expanding our idea of what it wasn't. When we think of like Neolithic hunter-gatherer, there was like a wheat trade route 10,000 years ago. There was ancient boats popping up in Africa. We have to just keep sort of like pushing the needle back, and it's getting right into that whole area of where Plato's Atlantis is supposedly set around that 9000
Mm.
BC area. And then one final thing on like to like really smash home like the boating trading thing. Let me just go up to an image so we can see an image of the. Let's go up so we can see here. Let's look at this map. Okay, so up here, this is the Pelagos Sea, which is loads of like islands, which is then covered, which is surrounded by a continent, which is also what you could call a Pelagos if it was in here, if it was a sea with islands surrounded by a continent. There is an island up here called Milo, which is where they found these like obsidian tool blades. I'm going to check my notes again. Yes, so 14,000. Is it? Yes. There are 14,000-year-old obsidian blades.
Wow.
Which have been found that come from an island of Milo or Milos, which is up here. And they found the blades in what would have been prehistoric Athens.
Sure. Oh, wow. Oh, that's really cool.
There's a cave called the Shitu Cave, and it's just outside today's Athens. So it's like prehistoric Athens. And the tools and things, it's like a kind of cave where people would bring things, ornaments, objects, and they would leave it in the caves. And they've dated back these obsidian blades 14,000 BC. That's 3,000 years before we're talking about a society with trade routes with Atlantis and whatnot.
So cool.
And these Milos blades are found all over these like tiny islands that are around here. So there was like a kind of tool obsidian blade trade route thing that was going on that stretched all the way down to Athens and all the way around this like whole entire area. And this is thousands of years before we're talking like Atlantis time. So yeah, people were moving around on boats. Like
I just looked this up too. The island of Cyprus as well. If you'll go back to your Mediterranean map, Cyprus just north of Egypt.
Yep. There we are.
Yeah. So I looked it up. 13,000, so 11,000 BC is when Cyprus is first inhabited. So if boats don't exist, I guess they just swam all that way to get there.
Yeah.
But no, they were definitely sailing. People have been sailing the Mediterranean. Since the Ice Age. That's really, really remarkable.
And just to top you there, over here, I think this is Crete.
It is.
Right. So before archaeology had put Crete, people arriving in Crete around 6,500 BC,
Mm-hmm.
but they've recently found, and I didn't put in my notes what they found, but I just put the number and I circled it loads and loads of times. They have found evidence of humans coming to Crete. Take a stab at when they actually came. Take a stab. Guess a date.
Well, okay, so the height of Crete is 1800-ish BC, the Minoans. So I don't even know. You're telling me to take a stab. So 15,000 years ago, 15,000 BC.
Just add another 100,000 years to that.
Oh my God!
130,000 years ago, they've got human activity on Crete. 130, like that's not even just like 10,000. So I'm like, I'm sorry, you're saying
really
that
cool.
130,000 years ago there was human activity found on Crete, but for some reason they didn't touch Malta and Cyprus, which is the neighboring islands, for
that's crazy.
For 100,000 years? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, they were. Yeah. They were probably on those islands. We just don't have the evidence of it yet. Definitely, they were hopping around all over those islands. That is so cool. There's a lot I could say there, but I want you to keep going. We'll go back.
Okay, so we're just going to keep whizzing through. Again, really recommend the Atlantis Puzzle documentary because I'm literally just lifting all of George's work and trying to tell as many people as possible. But okay, so we've got, yes, that's George. We've got the boats. Right, now this is where it gets like really spicy. So taking Plato's like description of like when you exit the Pillars of Heracles and also using geometry because in where is it? It is Plato's school that he wrote that he had in ancient Greece, and over the door of it, he said a quote like, "Let no one ignorant to geometry enter here." So George was saying that you always have to like take into account that there is that all of Plato's work, he said, they're like you've got double uses. You can use them as entertaining stories, like a child. You can teach a child something, but you could be an advanced initiate in all of Plato's and Socrates and stuff work, and you would be able to get like another level, another layer. So again, he goes into all of the sort of the scientific layering that could be inside Plato's texts, and one of them. So he looked into like the geometry, and basically saying that in the text, he's being clever, and when he references there were the Atlantis like kingdom or like society was larger than Asia and Libya together. He's actually George thinks he's quoting a quote from, I believe, Herodotus when he was describing Europe, the length of Europe. But he was saying that actually if you and he described it to being in like an arc shape. So if you actually take it and you take the measurement of the butt of North Africa with geometry, it actually in an arc shape, it is longer than Asia Minor and Libya together. And he also references in the Greek, there's very specific times when in the text, Atlantis is referenced as a continent, an island, and a center island, meaning the center part of that centric city. And he said that it's very, very specific when each Greek word is used for what, whereas in the modern translation, it kind of all gets put into island, which is why we have this weird idea of the island of Atlantis. But people are like, wait, but it was the size of a continent. But wait, but how big? Wait, it can't be an island that sank that's bigger than a continent.
Sank. We don't have enough words to properly convey what they're saying.
Exactly. But he was saying like in the Greek, it's very specific when they're talking about center island in the centric city, whether when they're talking about an island in and of itself and when they're talking about a continent. And all of them kind of work and gel when you're looking at the geographical image like this. Yes, there is an Atlantis continent, but like Libya, Egypt, it's that whack of land that is surrounded by all of the rivers and the tributaries that would have been there at the time. But also right bang where you expect it to, where the geography places it, the central city of Atlantis, guess where that ends up being in retrospect to the Pillars of Heracles and everything?
I don't know.
Right bang on the
does it? Wow, that is
bang on.
That's crazy.
And they make a point in the documentary to say that people who have taken the theory of the Richat structure online and like really run with it, obviously haven't maybe fully digested and understood George's work on it, because he is not suggesting in any way that the sea was that much higher. That would put the Richat structure. He goes, that's not. I've got no scientific evidence for that. That literally could not happen. There is like a difference of I think 1,200 meters or 1,200 feet difference, and you just can't account for that in 10,000 years. So that's not part of George's rhetoric. He's talking about the Richat structure, and he being an identical fit geographically and geometrically to Plato's text. And so he went out there in 2008, which is like, before YouTube, I think, was even like really kicking off.
Yeah, maybe just in the first 3 years or so.
So he went out there, and he went out there with a team, and they did loads of experiments and like seismic stuff, and basically this is the image of Plato's description of the rings, and what we find at the it literally fits to the point where like the entryway at the bottom of the Richat structure, there is a natural like canal channel where and there's evidence everywhere that this place was full of water. There is they're saying that in the Green Sahara period, this place would have been like a fisherman's paradise. There is stone tools and blades and obsidian and all kinds of things. There was just buckets of it in the 70s when they first really went out to this place and started like looking at this site. It is riddled with human activity, like Neolithic human activity. And it even fits to the point. Let me scroll in here. So in Plato's has description, it talks about like an entryway and these concentric rings, and it talks about this like a side canal within a canal, which is like 9.5 kilometers long. And they went and they measured it, and there is actually like a natural canal tributary dip on that second ring that goes around 9.5 kilometers. Like they're talking about this is so on point with the diameter, the description that is in the Plato's text, that it's like phenomenal. If this is just happens to be a circuit, like a happenstance, like an accident, it is like a phenomenal accident, because we're talking down to this like little random side canal and whatnot.
It is odd how particular some of the things Plato says is, right? I mean, it's commonly said that it's specifically used as a tool for his narrative, which I mean, he certainly had a narrative. He had a reason why he brought the story up. But it is interesting how particular some of those details are. Rather than it just being this whimsical, once upon a time there was this, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, here's this civilization that did this and this, and they were so, they were so successful, and then they tragically fell, and it's kind of it's an obvious metaphor to get the point across. You wouldn't necessarily go into, and these were the animals that they had, and this was the color of the stone that was there, and this location, it was this many, there's a lot of particulars there that are very interesting.
So yeah, he was well, this guy George is just phenomenal. So he goes into that, and he goes into like using, okay, so say this back in the early Holocene period was this was a wet area, and there would have been like a natural formed concentric ringed area which people could literally access from that main river that was going across North Africa, and you could also access it through all the tributaries in the seas inside North Africa. And there was clearly there was clearly human activity here, but the thing is that it's been so massively understudied. Obviously George has been out there, but and some people in the 70s, and obviously like YouTubers and things, but having like a proper hardcore archaeological study in a dig is nigh on impossible because of the location and temperatures and everything. It's just so remote. But all of this area aligns with what would happen. They spoke to this expert on like tsunamis and flood damage, and they looked at the geography of this area. And because in the Green Sahara, all of the mountains that were described to being up at the north of the Atlantis city, circular city, which is exactly what you find here. You find this huge mountain range to the north. You find an exit way to enter with the ships to the south, and then you have across the whole continent of Atlantis, that West African thing, you would have the huge plains, which more than enough accounts for the size of what's in the text. But because of the wetland, because it would have been so rainy and wet, it means that on top of the mountains you have this thing called liquefaction that can happen. So it can get very dangerous. And if there is a disaster event, if there is a earthquake, if there is a major disaster issue, not only would you have a flood that would come from whichever direction it's coming from, you would also get this massive landslide that would happen from all of the wet earth that's on this kind of oily layer at the top, and it would literally it would slide down the mountain. So you'd have a huge flood coming from one end, and then it would whack against the mountain, and then you would have this literal slide. They referenced a part of an island in Hawaii literally just slid away after an earthquake. It just disappeared into the sea. And they were talking about how, again, if you go back to the text, one of the other major mistranslations of Plato is that it does not say sank. It does not say like sank into the sea. That's an English translation on the word. What the actual Greek word is covered. It says that the city of Atlantis was covered, not sank, covered, which is exactly what would happen in this area if there was a massive natural disaster, because you've got the height and you've got the, taking in the account of all the elements. And so that was really interesting. So when you're saying, one, it's not Atlantis, the island that sank into the sea. That's the English translation of what's happening. It's more nuanced than that. They're talking about just the city, not the whole Atlantean Empire, just the city was covered by the sea, and then it was impassable. It turned into mud, and it was impassable from that point onwards. Which also, they said that if there was a huge tsunami type thing that slid like a lot of muddy earth and water from the top over and covered this center city, it would also completely block the passageway here, and then therefore water would be retained in this circle for a very long time because it wouldn't have a drainage. You've essentially like filled a belly button with water and it's got stuck there, and it would take thousands of years to really drain it all out and away. So just really interesting, like, and obviously today that's what like Sahara looks like, but back in the day it would be very wet, very green, very Amazon-y. Oh, and this is a modern day crocodile that's been snapped, because just to show how like wet the area would have been, there are still a very small amount of crocodiles that live in the Sahara.
What?
But they survived from the Holocene, the early Holocene. And you can tell it was from the early Holocene because they found cave like scratchings, or like not scratchings, it's art. They found cave art of these like massive alligators and people and these animals.
Holy crap.
Like hippos and alligators, because that's what it would have been. It would have been wet and everything.
Wow, that is so cool.
And they're still there. They've still a very small little group. They're hanging on 10,000 years later. Good on you.
That's amazing.
Crocodiles. So yeah, there we go. And then so this is like literally like, I think it's superimposed the Plato's description with the channels and just how well it fits. It's just mental. And then to close, I think I've kind of covered everything. Because it says, just to double check, that the Greek word for that we translate into sank is the Greek word called thissa, which means it doesn't mean submerged. It doesn't mean sank. It means covered. So you have to read it that way. So we can't say anymore. We can't quote Plato and go, it sank into the sea or submerged into the sea. It was covered. And then the other word with it is omani, which means settled. Again, so something covered it and then it settled. Interesting. And now the final bit, which like blew my mind, was because that Critias is unfinished, right?
Well, I didn't know. I'm not an expert on anything to do with Plato. Oh, okay. I just like hearing about it.
So Plato, there's Timaeus and Critias, or Critias, however we want to say it. I say Critias. It just ends, and it's really weird. So like literally, you're reading it, and it says in the part of the story, Plato is talking. He's talking through the scriptures for Zeus. Zeus is having a meeting of the gods, like an emergency meeting of the gods. And he's saying to everybody, right, Zeus, realizing that the chosen race was behaving despicably, wishing to punish them, called to council all the gods, and on having assembled them, said, and then literally that's the end of the book. There is no more text. Now,
greatest troll of all time.
Well, this is exactly it. So we've always been told, and I've always believed, that either it was unfinished, like one day he just never went back to writing that and like put the project aside, or he did finish it and we're missing the end of the text. But what is much more likely, when you actually read Plato and look at what clever things that he's doing, he's actually mirroring a scene that is from the Odyssey. and which is where Zeus has got all the gods together, and because in that exact same scenario, Zeus says to the pantheon of gods, "Oh, alas, how mortals put the blame on the gods. They declare that from us stem their misfortunes, while it is often they themselves who, with their bad deeds, fall into grief beyond what's written." And the scenes mirror each other, so it's almost as if Plato said, and then said, and it's like up to you. It's up to you, to the reader, to continue the story. And if you haven't learned that if we don't record our history and keep our information, which is the whole point of Atlantis, they're saying, "Oh, you Greeks, you Greeks, you know nothing. Us Egyptians have retained our history. We go back thousands of years. We go through cycles of culture being destroyed and reimagined and destroyed." And he literally does that at the end of Cretaeus, because we're hanging on by going, "But what was said?" And it's like, it's lost information, which is exactly the point of Atlantis. Like, really, when you bottle it down to it, it's about a lost story. So he doesn't even end it, but it's very, very clever how he like mirror images something from the Odyssey.
Wow.
And
How cool.
in that in the Odyssey, when the gods of the pantheon together, the only god that's missing is Poseidon. And Poseidon is king of Atlantis.
Sure.
So there's like Easter eggs that, again, he's like, if you're a little kid, you just take it at face value, or if you're like a non-scholar, you take it at face value. But if you are initiate to Plato's things, it's like there's all this like hidden secret Da Vinci Code shit that's going on, which I was like, oh my god. So I now changed my mind. I don't think that it's a lost, I don't think he didn't finish it, and I don't think it's a lost piece. I think that he deliberately was doing it to be like, mic drop, boom.
How cool is that? Very, very interesting theory. I next time we come back, I'm gonna have an applause, but that was super, super interesting. So
everyone's still with us at this point.
Yeah, we're doing well. We got a big group in today. So
do we? Hello, everybody.
So over time of looking into Atlantis, this was actually for everybody watching. There's going to be I was on Danny Jones recently. I don't know when it's going to come out, but
oh, nice. Okay.
So we talked a lot on that podcast about how this little genre, this industry of people researching ancient mysteries through a new lens has been around for, has strongly been around for maybe 4 or 5 decades now. And it's gotten to a point where, these things started out as being very fantastical. And then over time, the research has become more rigorous and people have changed their viewpoints. And now you have all these people, who are researching and looking for lost civilizations, lost, ancient technology, that kind of thing. And now we're at a point, I feel like, especially in the last 10 years, where people are just branching off and we all sort of have our own opinions. It's not just aligned to this one big author anymore or anything like that.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like your hunt for Atlantis and your own perception of it has changed over time?
It's changing a lot. It's changed a lot since I got into it.
Which I should also add, I think makes it intensely more interesting. This little presentation was very, very interesting to me. And I love that. Now that we're getting to a point where people have gone down so many rabbit holes and they go, okay, maybe this thing we've been thinking for the last 10 years isn't right. I need to look at this in a new way. And then a new theory comes out that's very compelling. I love that. It's not confirmation bias. You're not sticking to the same thing that people have been saying for 10 years and trying to, cultivate an audience by repeating everything everyone else is saying, but you are actually willing to change your views over time as evidence seems compelling to you. And that's one of the things I love about you.
Thank you. And you too as well. I've seen you definitely you revisit your views, which I think is really important, because new information comes, like the timeline slides in different directions. We get new information and we go, okay. Yeah. But I think picking a hill to die on, like taking an opinion, and then, as much as I would love for that tomorrow there be an excavation somewhere and they find this entire temple that dates back to like 30,000 BC, that would be so cool. But if and when that does or doesn't happen, I can only follow like the information that I've got, and then I can filter it into two things. Things that I like know for sure, like what is the image of what we know for absolute sure? What do I hold space for? Like that could be, because I'm very aware that there are things popping out of the ground in Turkey and other places that are being dated like way older than Atlantis. And so I'm trying to create a picture of like what did the world look like from like 20,000 to 10,000 BC? Because I had a very different picture of it when I was at school. I was literally like cavemen and that's it. And now I've got all these like complex, there are actual cities in Turkey from like 8,000 BC. There are like incredible ornate temples, massive megalithic pillars and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, I have to try and like fit that world into my other world. So where I'm sitting right now with Atlantis, I think that there is a very strong, well, there is evidence that there was I didn't even go into it in the talk, but in the documentary, they talk about this ancient society in Northwest Africa, like a Neolithic society that were seafaring. They had the boats. They had like a culture and a society. They had a different language. So apparently in history, Africa sort of split to east and west as two kinds of cultures. So there were the land people, which were in the like Mesopotamian side of it, and there was the water people that were on the other side of Africa, more lower down. And around the early Holocene, these two, when Africa became like this green wetland, they started to meet because they could actually like travel to each other. And there was two different languages. And this documentary puts the idea in is the idea of Atlantis, of this huge like power coming out of Northwest Africa and coming across and interacting with and fighting with the water people. And they've got evidence of that fight happening. There's like cave paintings and drawings, and they found burials in Africa of people with hundreds and hundreds of stone-tipped arrows. So there was big old battles. There was a war going on at one point, and they were like, is the allegory of Atlantis drawing on this ancient memory of the time when this huge society came out of North Africa and kind of conquered all the way along, and they had a different language and they had stone-tipped tools, and they had like an art, like they were regulated enough that they could have like an army. And because we're seeing Atlantis through Plato's lens, and because he's putting a little bit of like a Greek spin on things,
Sure, absolutely,
we're imagining them to look like Greek and Roman.
These big marble Greek temples. Yeah.
But actually, what if they used a really good example about the Mongolian Empire was like one of the biggest empires in history ever, but they didn't build like we kind of like equate massive empires and societies with massive feats of like architecture. And we're like, well, if they didn't have the pyramids, they weren't really. And I'm like, no, but the Mongolian Empire was like massive and powerful and did a lot of stuff, and they were organized, but they don't really have like that megalithic building history behind them. Exactly. So I was like, so now I'm changing my view of what the original Atlantis society. I think they could be a lost, like Neolithic, potentially like Bronze Age style. Like we haven't found any evidence for metal. Copper was being used around 10,000 BC, but other than copper, we haven't found any evidence of that yet. But then also, we kind of never really would, because metals would be any metals that were used before the Holocene would be gone, especially if it was a wet environment. They'd all be rusted and gone really quick. So that's right now. I'm sitting in what I know for sure is that there was most probably a very organized North African society, community, kingdom that and then like the story of that, the memory of that, and then there probably was a huge flood daily. I mean, definitely around the Younger Dryas impact, and that massively wiped out and knocked back everybody in this entire area, and that there is a core memory of that, and it's been passed down and passed down and passed down. The Egyptians got hold of it, and it became and it got packaged by Solon, by Crataeus, by Plato into a much more Greekified version of it. And so I'm trying in my brain really not to envision Atlantis through Greek eyes, but envision it through more Neolithic eyes. And then where I'm holding space, I've got no evidence for, but I'm holding space for that society to be really good with stone, really good with megalithic stuff. There is ancient stone, like Neolithic stone, stone circles and stone buildings in North Africa, but they haven't been properly excavated and looked into and studied. And that's only just what we can see.
There's one in Egypt, actually, Nabta Playa. It's a Stonehenge that's in Egypt, out in the southern desert, I believe. And it far predates. I mean, this is like early dynastic Egypt, long before the first dynasty.
I think that huge gray area before First Dynasty. So somehow between Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and First Dynasty, I'm still working out what I think that whole time period looked like in different places in the world. But I'm holding like so much space for the idea that they could use metals and that they could work tools and they could work stone in ways that like later civilizations could only ever try and imitate. And that's where I am with that. What I think is less and less likely is that it's like a Greek or Roman style civilization of Atlantis that got wiped out, and then we did the exact same. I don't think any civilization will come back exactly the same. Culture changes. That's the whole point. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And that's where I can see, I'm like, I really do not believe that Plato just invented this, because it doesn't align. He was not he was not a children's entertainer. He wasn't a party entertainer. He wasn't a thespian. He was a critical thinker, philosophical thinker. And I don't think he would just invent something. I think he would use something, but he was way more layered and clever and secret initiate stuff.
I love that. I think I'm maybe somewhere similar with you on Atlantis. Looking into Plato is not really my playhouse, but I sort of hold like a very loose interpretation of what Atlantis might be. And I often wonder if it's this huge amalgamation of ideas and events that sit at the back of the Greek mind, right? Like they have they have a vague sense of who the Mycenaeans were. This the big city of Mycenae with these huge cyclopean blocks, and there's these big tombs that they thought these giant one-eyed Cyclops were buried in or helped build. They have this kind of mythical view into their deep world, and there's probably lots of instances. Maybe even it's all the way as far back as I hear bona fide archaeologists say all the time that there's probably certainly a distant memory of a great flood that comes from a dramatic event at the end of the Ice Age, and it's probably that paired with all of these other Greek cities that are destroyed by these events. I mean, you look at the cities around Santorini, look at Minoan Crete being destroyed at the end of the Bronze Age. Lots of Greek cities ended up underwater and were destroyed from these natural events. So this is something that the Greeks are familiar with and that they know about. And so it makes sense that Plato would draw on that, because it's kind of something that hits home for Greek people. And so I think that the actual word Atlantis probably is a placeholder for an amalgamation of all these things that are in their distant memory, and it's being pulled into a story that he's packaging. And certainly he's using it for his narrative. But that's really, really interesting what you say about it could be two people or two groups of people. You have people that are living in the Sahara, living in this tropical area, not out on the sea. But then you have seafaring people meeting, and it's this force that sweeps across the Mediterranean and basically, spreads their culture across the Mediterranean. And that's that distant memory of that coming out in the story.
I mean, they have evidence of mass graves from these
Mhm,
two people like meeting and warring, which
mhm,
it does mirror in that. So this in the Plato story, it actually mirrors two wars that did the exact same thing. So in the Plato's story of Atlantis, it talks about the ancient Athenians and the Atlanteans, and at first the Atlanteans come in, they come out through the pillars of Heracles, out of where they were towards where the Athens is, and come in and like destroy everyone. And then in the story, Athens comes back to like kick their butt, but then everybody dies in the
yeah,
massive deluge that like happened at that moment.
mm,
So that happened with the West Africa and East African, the two completely different cultures, when they met in the Green Sahara. Huge war, and it did happen where like one came right the way across. They would have come
mhm,
from literally Mauritania right down to where people were living around where the early origins of the Nile people, like water people with the Nile, and then land people up by Mauritania. And then they're kind of mimicking that story of them fighting back and then everybody dying in the deluge.
yeah,
But then there was a war that was like right before Plato's time, where the Spartan attacking Athens, and then Athens attacking Sparta,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so you could equally argue that Plato was added that in to reference the Spartan whatever war. But I think that
The
the
Spartans are
old one.
a great example of a highly advanced culture that is not building anything substantial whatsoever. If you go to Sparta today, it is a cow pasture. They have no buildings and they have no public art. It's a perfect example of a culture that just didn't value those things. And to try to go find ruins of it, to try to find temples of it, would be
Mm,
impossible because they just don't exist. And I mean, and that's 450 BC. A little bit before that, I guess, is the height of. Well, no, about 450 BC is the height of Spartan supremacy, I guess.
mm,
But yeah, you don't find ruins of that. And really, we don't find a whole lot of, as far as I know, don't find a whole lot of Spartan armor either. All their metallurgy is gone, reused, rusted away, turned into dust. So that's very interesting, and I love what you say about having to remove the Athenian lens when you're looking at the story of Atlantis, because we look at the religion of Christianity through an ancient Roman lens, because they had to they had to put the Roman filter on it, because they had to make all of the new, when the Roman Empire became Christian, all of the Christian statues were in the same style of the Roman pagan gods to appeal to
mhm,
the Roman people. So this is probably, a similar thing, is, the reason that Athens is included in the story of Atlantis. Flint Dibble went in depth on this on the Danny Jones podcast, where he said that he himself personally was on a dig at Athens, and they excavated down to the bedrock, and they didn't find, like evidence of an ancient city there. Well, it's probably not that the literal city of Athens was actually at war with Atlantis, but Athens could just be a placeholder, a very loose 9,000 year later placeholder for Greek people or people that were living on the sea. Or that's just a part that Plato is injecting because it makes it directly relevant to the Athenian people, saying, look, we've done this once before, or something like that. So trying to remove the Greek and Athenian lens from the Atlantis story, I think, is very important if you want to have a realistic approach to what Atlantis probably was. So I am so glad that is like the next step that you're on, because it is intensely interesting to listen to the presentation you just gave.
yeah, I'm really excited by it, because I'm excited by Atlantis anyway. Because my favorite thing to do is to think of. I get excited by imagination and what if, and
Yeah.
that's why I love holding that space. But this really
Mhm.
it really got my brain excited, because I've always thought that there is a kernel, that the Atlantis story, that there's kernel of truth. I do not believe that Plato just invented it entirely, because
Mhm.
it aligns. It started off with the Younger Dryas, and the exact date that the deluge, that was dated to the deluge in oral tradition, was the exact date that the world was literally smashed to pieces by crazy stuff that was going on. It would have ignited earthquakes and tsunamis and deluges and floods, sort of like on at least over half the globe. Is what they've got evidence of the Younger Dryas comet impact in South Africa, and they've also got it all over North America. Like this thing hit wide, and so I've always been like, yeah, but it cannot be a coincidence. Like, of what are the chances? And now just more and more and more stuff keeps just backing up the idea that there was this a way more advanced. And when I say advanced, I mean like everything that's aligning with what we can see so far with this pre-pottery Neolithic stuff coming out of the ground.
Yeah, more of like, when you say the word advanced, I guess that has to be qualified now. You have to say exactly what you mean, unfortunately. But I guess, from my point of view, when I say it, and you probably agree, it's just an organized society that is not just wandering hunter-gathering cavemen.
Yeah, because hunter and gathering, really the group doesn't work. I think it's something like 120 people, because they say that your literal brain can only accurately remember and retain like enough information that it's only in the hundreds. Like you physically, it's impossible to know and recognize and remember everybody's faces and name. Once you get past a couple hundred, we can't retain it, because we're only supposed to be in these like little groups for survival, unless we start to have some sort of structure that works together, where we go, hey, okay, you take the watch and I'll do the food, and then you take the baby and I'll take the, like, we have to start delegating the groups when you get over, I think, 120 people. So for me, that's when it starts to getting into a culture, when people start to rely on other people, and you have to start working as like a kind of worker bee, worker ants, that type of thing. And yeah, like let's I guess everyone's looking for a buried ancient Egypt, but I'm like, what if we're not looking for an buried ancient Egypt? What if we're looking for something that like aesthetically is completely different? What if they but I would be willing to bet that if we could properly LiDAR scan, and if we could properly get into it all the way across that green Sahara, we're going to find things. We're going to find prototypes of everything that ended up along the Nile in Egypt. That just sprouted out from the first dynasty. Are you kidding me? No, we're going to find them. They're going to find them in the Sahara, and we're going to find them in North Africa. And there's going to be stone shit, and there's going to And so
I love that. I love that. When it comes to Egypt, for me, I think when I look at the you talk about the there's the 27,000 year long kings lists that they have. And essentially what happens is, you look at the Egyptians, and they are developing a chronology of their kingship, that goes all the way back to the first dynasty. And it is just, these exact names. And then once you get beyond that, then you start kind of taking leaps and bounds in time, where they don't really have a firm understanding of their history, because they have these mythological, that we assume are mythological kings in their kings list that rule for thousands of years. But probably really what the Egyptians are saying is, hey, this is once upon a time, or a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Our civilization is really, really, really old. So you had these Egyptians that had, at least my opinion is, you have these Egyptians that had always lived along the Nile. We have these 70,000-year-old tombs that they've found, like out in the deserts, and their DNA is the same as Egyptian people today. So you've always had the Egyptians living along the Nile. And, for whatever reason, over the thousands of years, their ability to do things rises and falls and rises and falls. But I agree with you. I think Atlantis, if we're going to find it, you got to look west, look under the Sahara Desert. Out there is where I think that, if there's a core to the story of Plato's Atlantis, and there's this big blind spot in the archaeological record. The Sahara Desert is got to be the most tantalizing possibility for me, that is the most interesting. And I love, again, I love what you said about possibly this force of culture just up arising from out of the deep Sahara and sweeping itself across the Mediterranean. That's really, really interesting, and I love that. And when you talk about that, you know, when ancient people, if they're looking back on that thousands of years later, well, you know, your response to, I guess, stimulus and what you perceive is kind of always the same, no matter how, or to people, to different people, it's always the same, no matter how grand it is. So I am just amazed by New York City today as an ancient Roman was, or as a, you know, say somebody from Northern Africa traveling to Rome who had never seen something like that. We'd be equally as amazed at the same thing. Does that make sense? So if somebody were talking, if somebody, you could bring somebody back to life and they were to tell me about ancient Rome, they would describe it in the same way that I would describe New York City, even though New York City is undoubtedly more impressive, right? So we kind of reach this limit. And as if Rome didn't exist, but only the stories of Rome existed for thousands of years, imagine what the perception of what Rome must have been like would be, if that makes sense, because somebody would be describing it as this grand city. There's this and that, this and that. And as time goes on and technology increases, your perception of what that must be like just dramatically begins to leave from reality. So that's why I think, you know, kind of what you said is taking off those Greek glasses and trying to really think about, okay, what are we actually trying to look at here? So I agree with you.
You also have to take into account that pop culture, since the boom of like Atlantis mania in the last like 100, 200 years, pop culture has kind of ruined Atlantis in a good way and a bad way, because I really enjoy any like Atlantis movie or Stargate Atlantis or anything like that. However, what it does do is it puts all these like preconceived imageries and also some people are really not sure like what the ancient Greek text says versus what the movie in the 50s say, what the Disney movie says, and people can get a little bit conflicted. Like even it's really hard to not try and see something in your mind that looks like something you've already kind of seen in pop culture. Absolutely. So pop culture's phased it out. The Greek version of events has like also got a Greek lens on it because it's a Greek story that we find it in. So it's really hard to just hold that aside for a minute and be like, okay, but what else could it look like? It could look like something that we can kind of picture Neolithic or Paleolithic or a Bronze Age, or it could look like something that we haven't found yet, that weird middle ground society of stone work that's coming out of Turkey, and also all like the weird miscellaneous things like the kind of the vases and the discs and the schist discs, and there are these things that are from prehistory that kind of just go back and we don't know how far back and from where, and like I'm like, oh my goodness, what if they found loads of pots and vases and discs like out in sites all across the Sahara? I don't know. So it's still my favorite ancient subject, and it's moving along. And the good news is I actually reached out to the director and the presenter of the Atlantis puzzle, really nice guy called Jack, and he came and gave me I got like a 30-minute 40-minute interview with him. It's on my channel, but he was really nice, and he was like, oh, I'm making another documentary. Would you be up for like collaborating and being a part of it? I was like, yes, I absolutely will, sir. So hopefully we'll see where it goes. It's very hard to make a documentary.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've tried.
Well, that was an absolutely fantastic presentation. I loved every second of it. So we have a couple of updates for everybody. The next episode is going to look a little different. I can't say. We might have a guest on too. Can't say too much, but we are finally getting the show on the road here. And we are going to be on Spotify. Finally, all previous 10 episodes will be on Spotify here within the next couple of weeks. Maybe a slightly altered brand update, just a little bit, because after this next episode, everything's locked in. So
we've locked in
what the podcast is what the podcast is after this next episode. I'm not going to say too much, but it's gonna be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. It's
Finally
going to be a
getting
little bit profesh, a little bit
yeah.
professional.
That's
But
the word I was
professional
looking for.
music, professional
Finally,
graphics,
yeah.
professional everything.
So we're finally getting there. None of that would be possible without all of you guys watching. We have a couple of soups to get to here as
Oh
well.
yeah, thank you.
You want to read the first one?
Yes, from Kevin Simmons, $20. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving. I appreciate your work.
Yeah.
Happy
How are you
Thanksgiving,
celebrating
you.
Thanksgiving?
Wait, when is Thanksgiving? I think we've been here
It's
before.
on Thursday.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think I should celebrate Thanksgiving. I'll make a somewhat better meal for myself, and I'll be very thankful.
Yeah. I mean, are you thankful that a very tiny portion of people from your country sailed across the ocean and established a different country? Does that make you thankful?
I'm very thankful. I'm very like it's amazing. It's the most amazing thing that we are like long distant cousins.
Yeah.
And we have the same ancient origins. We have this
Yep.
we all come from the same place. But just by being on that side of the Atlantic, it made the cultural differences that just even a few hundred years later, it's amazing. We always talk about like the differences between British and American. We're like the same, but like how are we so different?
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful that happened and you're there. And I'm here.
I read an interesting book recently. I listened to an interesting lecture called "Rebels in the Wilderness," and it is about how Great Britain accidentally created the United States, and they created like our economy and our personality by accident. So you have Spain and Portugal and the Dutch and the French. They're colonizing Mexico, Central America, and South America. Nobody's really messing around with North America other than England. And it becomes really, really expensive to keep these English colonies alive, to keep bringing them food because they don't know how to farm the land yet. The winters are really bitter, without all the infrastructure that England had. And the people just kept on dying, and they would get, killed by Native Americans. And it was really, really expensive for the British government. And so eventually the crown is like, this can't be a state funded thing anymore to try to colonize this new land. So I guess here's what we'll do. We'll take all of our, not all of them, but we'll take some of our prisoners, we'll take our rebels and our ne'er-do-wells, all the people that are like the scum of England, and we're going to send them on boats, and we're going to make those guys colonize. We're just going to get them out of England. We'll make them the colonists, and then we're just going to open up the colonies to entrepreneurs to fund it. So rich people living in London can fund the colonies, and then they can make money on it. So you have these entrepreneurs who are basically employing all these prisoners and rebels to colonize a new country, and then it works. So you have an entirely new country that is founded on rebellion, crime, and capitalism, and that becomes the United States of America. It's
still like that today.
That's a pretty crazy story, actually, that they just accidentally made the United States and determined our personalities and everything. Like, how Americans are so rebellious and patriotic and whatever. All of that comes from England just sending all the worst of the worst to the colonies and be like, get these guys out of here. But then giving them a ton of money, and then it accidentally worked.
I've got so much respect for like the first pioneer people who were just like, oh, it was so rough. I've seen shows like 1883, which is like the Yellowstone prequel.
Yeah, Lauren watched that show. She loved it.
It's so good, but you really went through it through the eyes of a young girl making that journey.
Yeah.
And there's other movies like Far and Away, which was with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, which is literally like there are these two they play Irish guy and a girl who tried to go out for the land grab, and they were just like, well, there's too many of you out here trying to get land, so just race for it, and it's first flag to the post gets that bit of land, which is mad. It's so violent, so crazy. So yeah, it's actually insane kind of what happened. But yeah, happy Thanksgiving, Kevin.
And the modern I guess in the modern day, people kind of look back and villainize those people as, they were these evil colonists that are settling this land that was already settled. The reality is, guys, those ages of expansion, the 14th, 15th, 16th century, it was an unstoppable wave of expansion, colonization, and progress that was going to happen no matter what. And all of the countries that benefited from it were the countries that had navies that were on the coast of Europe and Asia. And every single country were all following the same trends of their navy, and they all colonized every single piece of land that they could. It was an unstoppable force that colonized the entire world and made a one world economy, like in the course of a few centuries. And the people that are born on the frontiers, you literally have no choice but to move forward. It doesn't matter to them what unfortunate native indigenous people are in front of them who they're going to have to run over. Everything is about survival, and you're just born amidst this unstoppable wave of progress that is going to either run you over or you're going to ride it. And that's just the way civilization has always been, unfortunately. So I am thankful that there were people who were able to survive all of that and create, as an American would say, the greatest country that has ever existed, which, there's lots of, that's a very American thing to say, but I'm thankful for it. I should say the most powerful country that has ever existed. That would probably be a better way to say it.
I mean, there's many words for America,
but I'm thankful for what people have done to create such a luxurious, if I were to pan the camera, like, to my apartment complex, people who lived at the beginning of our country could never imagine that I would live such a leisurely life and travel so much and have so much wealth. And all that was done on the backs of unimaginable suffering and people who never experienced one day from the kind of comfort and wealth that I am as like a middle-class person. So anyways, very, very thankful. All right. We got David Stig Hansen. What's up, man? Luke, please give me a shout out. Do you know who this is, Johanna?
I can't see the picture.
This guy.
I know David.
This guy has been to the wrist shot like 3 times.
Oh, hello, yeah. David.
So he's traveled to the wrist shot structure. We talked on the phone last year, maybe last summer for a while. And I wasn't able to join him. But he traveled to the wrist shot structure and has a bunch of videos on his YouTube channel of some artifacts that were out there, and he's had guys drive him out there. So
I'm gonna check your channel, David.
Yeah, really, an adventurous spirit that goes beyond anything that even I have done. I would love to go out to the wrist shot someday. But yeah, really cool dude. Mark Clark, you want to take this one?
Will either of you be coming to the Sage Wall?
MT is Montana.
Oh yeah, it's on my my absolute list of travel is I want to go to the wall in Montana. It's like it's my topmost at that, and to go to Petra is on my like personal travel list. So I'd be picking Montana or Jordan. Montana or Jordan. I know it's on private land. You have to get like pay special permission to go.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal.
But yeah, I definitely want to go check that out because it's so ridiculous online. You can only see what is on Google, so it's so different when you see things up close and you get to see it from all different angles and go, that looks like that from that angle, but not from that angle. So yeah, I'm already planning to, Mark, and I will take my camera with me.
Yeah, we have Egypt planned, but we got to do some more stuff. Like maybe there's some stuff we should do a collab video, Stonehenge. There's other places in Europe. There's other places in Europe I'd love to see. And at some point, if you're able to spend like a couple weeks in the States and we could travel around, there's a lot of cool stuff to see here too.
Yeah. Montana. I'm a massive Yellowstone fan as well. So I wanted to go to Montana anyway.
Oh my gosh.
And do the very thing that Yellowstone hates, which is be an outside tourist coming to Montana. I was like, sorry guys.
You and Lauren have never talked. Have y'all ever talked about Yellowstone? That's like her that whole franchise.
We talked about Harry Potter. I didn't know she was into yellow. Well, of course she is because she's cool. Yeah. But okay, yeah, Yellowstone.
She's watched. She was an extra, I think, on 1923 because they shot it here in San Antonio.
Oh my gosh, I love that show as well. All of the Yellowstone prequels are awesome. They had to stop it because of the writer's strike, so they stopped it at the most biggest cliffhanger, and I'm waiting for 1923 to come back. So yes,
Yeah. So yeah, really cool. Well, we'll definitely have to do that.
yeah,
Maybe the next cosmic summit that you come to,
yeah. Stay
stay with
and
us in North Carolina.
yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, maybe we can get with Wandering Wolf and go out to Sagewall because he has a connection with the
Oh,
people that
okay,
own that land.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. And then we got one last one, another one from David. Thank you very much.
David.
So there's a 50-mile canal going through the lower Adrar that points right to the mouth of the Rishot. Even Randall Carlson says people were quarrying there for 1.2 million years. Wow. I went to those quarries. That's amazing. Very
Wow.
interesting. 1.2
Well,
million years.
quarrying. I mean, that if you're quarrying, you know how to use stone. You might
Mhm,
you might have a bit of time to work out how to like manipulate it, move it, carve it,
mhm, mhm.
make art out of it.
Yeah, I should probably maybe maybe specify that by being like hominids are quarrying it, because we know that Homo erectus was at the Richat structure like 1.2 million years ago, and that's where all these pear-shaped hand axes. You've seen these that are like they're in the
Mm.
shape of a teardrop and they have a point on the end of it, and
Right,
you hold it in
yeah.
your hand, and that point you can smash things with it. It's like the world's first
Pointy
tool.
end.
Yeah,
Bit
and
towards
you
the
know what's
pointy end.
interesting? What's really interesting is a million years ago when people are out there in the Sahara with these pear-shaped hand axes, they, of course, they end up just dropping them all over the Sahara, really all over the ancient world. Is that I'm not a geologist, but through means of soil deposition, whichever term is correct there, the artifacts in the ground basically get churned up and they can get put in different geological layers. And what's interesting is all those hand axes, you can find them on the ground around the Richat structure, but they all come from the geological layer of 11,600 years ago. They just all got churned up. And so I've seen people speculate that, a geological
Thing happened and all of
something
the
happened and it churned up
ancient
these
yeah.
old artifacts to the
Yes.
surface. So
Makes sense if
that's
there was a
getting outside
flood.
my expertise, but yeah, that's really really interesting.
Yeah, David says that hundreds of thousands of these hand axes, all in the one valley. Archaic lens work. I will do, David. Thank you.
Oh, here we go.
There it
See,
is.
100,000 of these hand axes all in one valley. Check archaic lens work. Very interesting. Yeah, maybe we should have David on at some point to talk about his experience
Mm,
out at the Rishat.
yeah, very cool.
Very, very cool. Well, okay, so I think that's all that's there. So
Amazing. Oh,
what do you
come in
have?
at 2 hours. Nice.
Yeah, so what do you have in the near future coming up?
Whew, what have we got? Well, obviously, we've got Raiders. Yeah, we're kind of crashing into Christmas and then the New Year. Trying to work out the kind of next year plan. I can't do Cosmic Summit next year. I should probably start officially saying that in case anybody thought I was going.
No.
I know one of my bestest friends is getting married and I'm a bridesmaid, and it literally lands right on the weekend of Cosmic Summit. So I've had to bow out for this year, but we'll be returning for future years. And but which is annoying because there is a really cool lineup that is being pulled together for Cosmic Summit 2025. It's on the 21st, the weekend of the 21st of June, back in Greensboro in North Carolina. Like they've got, I mean, I don't know if they're officially announced. I don't know if I can say who's officially, I don't know if they've been like publicly announced yet, but
I think they're all on the new website.
yeah, like Dan, who's on Rogan.
Yeah.
Dunking Dan, who was recently on Joe Rogan, is going to come and talk. And
Matt Bell got announced.
yeah, okay, nice. Yeah, it's a really really good lineup. So I'm going to be watching. When it's not the wedding, I will be watching on the live stream because you can, of course, always do that. I've been talking to Steph, well, actually, Steph suggested, she was like, "Is there going to be a Cosmic Summit Europe? Could there be like a London leg of Cosmic Summit. So for everybody sort of this side of the world that can't quite make it over to America and don't want to live stream, but yeah. Anyway,
Hey, I was just thinking about this. When does Hugh do his megalithomania thing? That's in London, right?
no, that's it's like in England, but not.
Oh, okay. Maybe wouldn't it be that would be fun if we got with him and we did like a live podcast or something there
Yeah. I need to
next year.
check out when it is. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so kind of at the moment, nothing's like super locked in. I'm just gonna head into 2025 and be ready. I've got nothing. I know you've got Egypt in January.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. Yeah, depending on what your itinerary is, it would be awesome if I could come out and we could get a bit of content live from Giza or something. That would be amazing because I'm only a couple hours away.
I'm about to lock in my dates pretty soon. I gotta get with NEXT. Speaking of which, we had a couple spots open up, maybe 2 or 3 spots on the tour.
Nice.
It's I'll put a link in the description and in the comment section if anybody wants
There's
to
always
join.
there's always a last minute loop around because obviously financially stuff people can become free, not free. Lastminute.com, but yeah, that's going to be in January. So if it can line up, and I really want to tempt Cash to come out because every year when I've gone,
that'd be cool.
Do you want to come to Egypt? He's gone, I don't know, maybe not really my thing, but
yeah, maybe we can do an extra 4 or 5 days or something like that.
Yeah.
However long you want to do. For myself, coming up in the near future, I'll announce it for people watching. So I have a collab video with Land of Kim coming out.
Nice.
This week or next week. And then on December 7th, I go on a second Olmec tour this year.
You're like on it.
Taking some people out there with me. I'm ready to not be on it. I've traveled. I have been to Mexico. This will be my 7th time in Mexico this year.
Oh my god!
And
yeah, traveling fatigue is real.
Yeah, and then I spent 3 weeks in Egypt, a week and a half in Peru, and then a week in Guatemala. And I got. Wait. Have I been to Guatemala since our last? How long have I been home now? I don't.
No, you've been home for 2 weeks because we last did you haven't gone anywhere in the last 2 weeks, have you?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. I'll check my passport.
Yeah.
You need a break, dude.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought that maybe I went to Guatemala between now and our last episode. I can't remember. It just all blurs together, but I am very much ready to. So after my Olmec tour, I fly straight from Mexico City and I meet Lauren in Atlanta. And we're going to go visit my family in North Carolina. I stay with them for a few weeks and I fly out of Atlanta to go to Egypt, and I'll be at Egypt the entire month of January. And then I come home and I get to be home for 3 months and not go anywhere. And I'm very excited for that. That's 2 months now. Good Lord. I'm ready to just be in the YouTube grind.
Yeah, get into a YouTube flow state. I need to do that as well. That's because I'm not immediately hopping off anywhere. Just going to get into a nice good, and we're going to get Raiders on a
and that's kind of what I'm thinking is when I get home from Egypt, there probably will be a lapse in episodes in the next couple months just because my schedule is stupid, and the places I'm going to go when I'm in North Carolina during the peak of the holidays, we can get a couple episodes in, I'm sure. But during Egypt, of course, you know how it is.
The Wi-Fi across the entire country is like 1 megabyte. It's almost impossible to do anything live or we have to go.
But we'll put out a schedule at the end of January, and Johanna and I will get together for a little while and figure out, okay, these are going to be our dates, these are going to be our times, and we're going to post it, and we'll have a schedule for the next however many months that we'll be on every time. So at that point, we'll be professionals in podcasting finally.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, guys. Is there anyone that's still tuned in or tuned in for a little bit today?
Yeah, we had a great crowd today. 750 people at the height.
Gosh,
that's great.
700 people just casually jumping in and saying hi. Amazing. Thank you all so much.
Yep. Yep. Thank you guys so much again. Eventually, someday, we will come up with something
With a
to
way to
say.
end the show, but until that
Yep.
time,
So,
it's in,
see you guys next
live
time.
live long and prosper.